All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Get Holiday Ready, the series by Apinio. I am super excited to see so many returning names here coming in from previous webinar sessions and so many new ones as well for our very last webinar for this series. And today I'm joined by the one and only Valeria, our expert lead in the research consulting team for trackings. Valeria, welcome to Get Holiday Ready.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the great introduction, Hussein.
I'm super excited to have you here with us. But I think, as you've seen from the series before, I always like to start with the topic of the seasonality of these videocasts that we're doing and these webinars and talk about sort of exactly why we're doing them and the goal behind them. And so I've made it sort of a tradition to ask my guests, why do you think this seasonality topic is important? And it's important for us to keep in mind all the things we've already talked about and the things we will talk about in this series.
Yes, so I'm not going to lie. Of course, I watched the previous episodes of the webinar
I
series.
hope so. I hope so.
I did. I was expecting this question to come. And overall, I'm going to start by saying that, trackings are among the most popular research method, not only within Apinio, but also used by global market research institutions. And they are so crucial for businesses because they help them understand how they're doing in the market, how well they're perceived by the audience, how well they are doing compared to the competition, and also how they're uh, doing well in KPIs such as customer loyalty, customer retention. So overall, trackings are important all year round, but we're specifically talking about them today because if we think about it, starting from Q3 and then culminating into Q4, companies tend to intensify their communication activities during this period. If you think about the period that starts from back to school, and then we move on to Black Friday, the holiday season, Christmas, New Year's. That's really a time when consumers get, I would say, bombarded with messages, informations, and it's also a time where consumers tend to spend more. So it's really crucial for brands to understand the market dynamics in this very sensitive period of time and to track how they're doing, what they can do better, what they can improve for the future. And I feel like a lot of brands tend to focus exclusively on sales volumes, which is, of course, a very important indicator, but they should be complementing that information with the measurement of brand performance KPIs, which is exactly what we do in trackings. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
I fully agree, and I'm very glad you mentioned this because this is sort of the way we designed this videocast series, right? We created this hero's journey. We started with Gabriela when we were talking about your target group. So know your target group when Q4 is coming in. Know who you're gonna sell to. Know who you're marketing for. Then we talked about pricing with Svea, and we talked about how to do good pricing research and how to know the optimal price for your target group. Then we talked about ads because Q4 also, ads play big role in Q4. We talked about ad research and we talked about QDA and many parts. And now I think leaving this to the end in trackings because in my head, trackings go beyond just Q4, right? They're very important for you to be able to stand your feet in Q4, but it's also very important for you to reap the results of what you built in Q4, right? For the year coming in and for the months that are coming in after Q4. So I think with that, we can just jump right into the topic of today. As usual, you will now see the chat icon open up on that side of the screen. You will also see the Q&A open up. So please, if you have any questions at any point while Vale and I are talking, please feel free to put in your questions in the Q&A and we'll address them right away. And you heard I just addressed her as Vale because that's her internal nickname at a video. Valeria, I hope that's okay. I think
Of
I
course.
just got so used to it at this point that it's gonna be super hard to call you Valeria. And there's also the audience chat that you'll see just opened up. Please also feel free to send in any message you might feel you want to send in the chat. And with that, I guess let's just jump right into it. Why are we even talking about trackings?
Right. So before digging into the topic itself, I actually wanted to take a step back and kind of resonate about the meaning of tracking and what it means. Because I feel like for those of us who especially work within the field, we're so often used to think about trackings within the business sphere, but truly it's something that we do every day. So taking a step back to track, as you can read in the slide, involves the idea of monitoring, observing, or recording something over time. And if you think about it, it's something that we do in our daily life. We do tend to track our weight when we're kids. Our pediatricians tend to measure our height. We might track our daily sleeping hours. We might track our calories intake, our steps that we do every day. So, truly, it's something that we do on a daily basis and not only belongs to the business scenario.
Definitely, but I guess Valeria, the question I immediately have in mind right now, like when I talk about tracking myself and my own health, I know that when I was a kid, we used to put it on the wall, right? We used to track my height on the wall. I still track my weight, guilty. But what does it mean for, or what do we track for brands? Like, what do we look at specifically in the business sense of the word?
Right. So I would say that when we talk about trackings, and this actually is relevant for all types of trackings, we have two main goals. So, first of all, we want to stay aware of the changes. So, before we were talking about weight, for instance, right? We tend to track our weight to make sure that we're staying within a certain limit that is considered healthy. And we want to be aware of any change that might be happening because that might be a signal of something else. And the second goal is actually observing the effects of an action taken to achieve a goal. Imagine that I want to increase the number of hours I sleep every night. So I start changing my daily habits towards that goal. And what I want to do is track my daily hours of sleep so I can actually make sure that the actions that I'm taking are working towards my goal. And actually, I'm going to deep dive even further into these two specific goals. But to do that, I actually want to introduce an example that to me is the most exemplary, the most striking of the tracking that we do in our daily life, and that really can explain what brands should be doing. And so, to do that, I want to ask the audience a question, which is, how often do you guys check up on your health? Meaning you do
Ooh,
your blood tests, meaning you do your blood pressure measurement, everything that you need to do to make sure that you're good, that you're healthy.
wow. I feel like I'm guilty of not doing this enough, and that's something people are always telling me. So good that I'm getting shamed at a public webinar now.
Oh God, no. I swear like this has a point. I'm not here to shame you, to judge you. You're gonna
Too
understand
late.
why.
Okay,
Right.
results are coming in now.
Wow, those who say never, you guys should really take care of yourselves.
Me guilty.
No, but nobody's judging here. It's a safe space.
But it's really interesting. We see we have a 40, 42, 42 distribution in every year and every other year. So our guests here are very, very healthy, and I'm very happy that they are. So people are checking over their health very, very often. And we have also a portion, 14%, that never do it. So where are we going with this poll? What's coming next?
Right. Again, I didn't just want to judge you. This has a point. So, going back to the main two goals that we were discussing before, right? The first one was staying aware of the changes. So, if you think about yourself and the medical checkups that you do, why do you do that in the first place? You want to make sure that you're tracking certain values, such as your hemoglobin level, your iron, your vitamins, because you want to make sure that they stay within a certain range that is considered healthy. Because if you see that there's some deviation, you will need to take action. That means that there's something going on that you need to take action for, as opposed to never checking up on yourself, which means that you're not doing anything to actually, be healthy, live a long, thriving life. You're not really doing anything to, maintain yourself in the healthy position that you are currently. And exactly as you do it for your own health, you should actually transfer the same thought to the brand's health, right? You want to make sure that you're measuring certain brand KPIs, that they stay within certain values, because that means that your brand is healthy, that it can thrive in the market. And you actually want to do these checkups, these trackings, because you can then detect in advance or in a timely manner that there's something going on, that there might be a threat to the health of your brand. So you can take action and make sure that you can survive in the market and that you can stay relevant for the consumers. So, exactly as we do for our own health, we should do the same for the brand's health.
So
And
basically, we need to treat tracking as also a proactive approach and not just a reactive thing, right? Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly as we do for our health. I mean, normally I know that, especially I guess for those who never do medical checkups, they only go to the doctors when they feel there's something going on, right? And most often it's always, you always have time to then take action to, feel better again. But if you do your yearly checkup, for instance, you're able to detect that in advance and you will not reach the point of feeling bad, right? So it's
Mhm.
the same for brands. You can detect the threats to your brands in advance so you can take action and make sure that you can stay relevant and you can stay on top of the competition.
Nice. So, what do brands do in this case?
So I think, well, this is the first goal. They need to track in order to, look that they're healthy, that they can thrive in the market. And in case they see a threat, then they can do what we're going to see in the next slide, which also leads to the second goal, which is observing the effects of an action that you take to achieve a goal. Again, I'm bringing a second medical example. I promise it's going to be the last one. But imagine that you do your blood test and you see that your vitamin D levels are low, lower than they should be, meaning that there's something going on, that you're not probably feeling very healthy. You start to take an action, meaning that you take vitamin D, you probably will get more sun exposures, and you do all those activities that your doctor is recommending. And after a while, you'll be taking a second measurement because after the action that you've taken, you probably want to see an increase in your vitamin D levels. And this is exactly what also brands should do, both when they detect that there's something that's not going wrong, that's not going well, or also when they just want to improve a certain KPI, right? So, what we want is that we want to take action and then we want to measure that this action is having any effect, is having any return. So, again, exactly what we would do for our own health, we should do for our brand's health. And again, I was talking about this example because I feel like it's the most striking, it's the most relatable, it's something that we can all understand. And we really need to think about the health of a brand as the health of a person, right? We want to make sure that we're healthy, that we thrive, and that we can always stay on top of what's going on around us.
I mean, I know a thing or two about vitamin D deficiencies. Living in Hamburg, that's something that we deal with for about 9 months out of the year when we need to take the vitamin D pills. But I know about vitamin D, right? I know if I have a vitamin D deficiency, vitamin D pill, go take it. I'm good. I'm better. How does that look like in practice for brand research? I'm guessing not as simple as go take a pill, right? Mm,
Well, not exactly. I would say
mhm,
that in some cases, the market dynamics are as complex as the human body.
mhm.
But this is actually leading towards the next topic that I wanted to discuss, which is kind of moving from our personal health to the brand health and specifically outlining the main types of trackings that we have. In reality, we can track all the KPIs. There are many trackings that exist within the research space, but the two main ones that we're normally used to run are brand health trackings, which kind of relate to the first goal that we were talking about before. So, monitoring that you're staying healthy. And that's exactly what this brand health tracking is doing. It's monitoring your brand's performance, but also monitoring your competitors' performance, meaning that you will get a full understanding of the market and its dynamics so you can always stay on top of what's going on and you can again understand what's working for you, what's not working, and you can take action in case something is not working in your favor. Then we've got the campaign trackings, which relate to the second goal that I was mentioning, the second example with the vitamin D. And in this case, this is a tracking that we launch if we are taking any action. For instance, we're launching a campaign, and this is where the name is coming from. We launch a campaign because we want to improve on certain KPIs and we want to measure the return of those activities. Overall, I must say that the brand health tracking are normally run periodically and they're a continuous measurement of certain KPIs and they have a more longer term perspective as opposed to campaign tracking, which normally live as long as the campaign lives. So they tend to be more on the shorter term perspective.
And I think a popular questions about campaign tracking, something could be that campaign trackings usually can start before a campaign even starts, right? In most of the time.
Exactly. We're
You know.
going to kind of outline it in the following slides. But in campaign trackings, what you want to do is measure before you launch your campaign so you can see your initial health situation. And then you launch your campaigns and you will want to see how the marketing activities that you've launched are affecting the goal KPIs. For instance, if you want to increase your brand awareness, you will be specifically be looking at this KPI before and after to see whether your efforts, your spending has a return on what you've done.
Nice. So I guess I'm super excited for the slides to come. I'll stop jumping ahead of myself, Vale.
No worries, you're just anticipating my thoughts.
Oh,
It's
here I am.
great. So, exactly. So, in the next slides, what we're going to see is an outline of the main types of tracking, the main types of methods that we normally see. The first one being the traditional brand health tracking. And this is probably something that 90, if not more, percent of you are already familiar with. This is the most popular approach, an approach that has been used for decades now, and it's based on what we call ADA approach. It's an acronym that stands for attention, interest, desire, and action, and wants to measure certain fixed brand KPIs, which are unaided awareness, purchase intention, first choice, usage, NPS, among others. These are the more popular KPIs, the ones that are always in there, but truly then you can personalize your brand health tracking with additional questions. And very similar to this type of tracking, which you probably already know, as I was mentioning, it's the campaign tracking. I'm saying it's similar because it's based on the same approach. It's normally measuring the same KPIs, but with a different goal. So in this case, again, we're measuring aided awareness, purchase intention, first choice. But then you've also got those questions about the ad itself, such as unaided ad recall, brand perception, NPS, and again, among others. You can then also track the perception on the ad itself. And also, again, you can personalize it to your liking and to the specific goals that you have with that campaign. And as we were mentioning before with campaign trackings, what we're doing is that we're launching a pre measurement. So we want to check up on the brand before we launch the campaign. We launch the campaign, and approximately 3 to 7 days after the end, we launch what we call the post measurements. So in the end, we're comparing pre to post to see whether our campaign has had any effect on the goal KPIs that we had. And finally, we have the mental availability tracking, which is very popular now. It's the more innovative of the bunch, I would say. And it is a way to track brand KPIs, but it's fairly different because it's not based on the ADA approach, but it's based on the concept of mental availability and the category entry points. So, to put it in short, the theory is saying that for a brand to grow, it needs to have both physical availability, meaning that it needs to be present at the point of purchase whenever the customer wants to make that purchase. And it also needs to have mental availability. What does this mean? It means that the brand needs to come into the mind of the consumer when a buying situation arises. And this buying situation is what we call a category entry point. So, a category entry point is a moment, an occasion, a location, or a motivation that lead the consumer to think about the category and as a consequence of the certain brands that belong within the category. So these are, I would say, the three main popular trackings that we run at Apinio. But again, this is also what is most commonly run across different research institutions.
I guess we have a first question already in the Q&A I can see here. And I guess it relates directly to the things we're talking about. So we can go ahead and put it on the screen and answer it now. And basically the question is, how often do we need to run these brand trackings?
Right. So it heavily depends on your marketing activities, I would say. For instance, with traditional campaign tracking, it's very ad hoc. So whenever you're running a campaign, you might want to track the effect of this campaign with a campaign tracking. With the traditional brand health and mental availability, it's slightly different. So I would say that depending on the industry, the most popular frequencies are either every quarter or every 6 months.
Mhm.
If you are operating in a fast pacing industry, then it's better to run it more often as opposed to then working in an industry where normally things tend to be very static, then perhaps once every 6 months is enough. So again, the frequency depends on the industry that you're operating in, but overall, I would say that a good chunk of our clients, I would say about 70%, and also that's what's recommended, are launching these on a quarterly basis. But then, of course, we can adapt the frequency depending on the marketing activities. Because again, if you're really intensifying your activities within a certain year or within a certain period of time, we can launch them more periodically, more frequently, to really stay on top and detect the changes in a shorter period of time. But again, quarterly is normally the rule of thumb when it comes to trackings.
Hmm. And I think you already mentioned that mental availability is now really the next big thing, right? I mean, at Apinio, we're also obsessed. I think almost every single member of our research team has read Dr. Jenny's book from the Institute, and we're all leading and we're all learning more about mental availability, learning more how to get better brand health insights. And I guess this is a question that I want to ask you. That's a question that I always get from clients myself, which is when looking at a traditional brand health, when looking at a traditional ADA approach, and then looking at the mental availability, a lot of times clients or people who are not well versed into the research world are not really familiar with what are the key differences between the two methods of tracking. So when would we use mental availability over traditional brand health, or vice versa? So as our in-house tracking queen, I guess I want to put you on the spot here and ask you that question. What would you say here is the main difference or advantage?
Right. So this is actually also a question that I get very often, and within our tracking experts, we also get quite often. And well, first of all, we must say that with traditional brand health, this type of approach, this type of method, is a methodology that has been used for again decades now, which means that we have a lot of historical data, a lot of data that we can benchmark against. So it's very useful when it comes to comparing, keeping track of KPIs that have been started collected years ago, right? So it's really useful when it comes to comparing things over time, because this is the method that has been considered the established way of doing things for so many years. And so when it comes to comparability, this is very useful, the traditional brand health tracking. However, it comes with its limitation, and mostly the fact that it's positively biased towards larger, more established brands. And to me, the biggest, let's say, pain point, the biggest critique that I would have with this methodology is that it doesn't really grasp the complexity of the market, of human behavior in the decision making towards a brand or the other. In this case, when it comes to traditional brand health, we're only asking one single question. We're assuming that there's one single comprehensive buying scenario, when in reality, we know that it's not the case. Just because I'm choosing a brand today, it doesn't mean that I'm going to choose the same brand tomorrow within the same category, but in a different buying situation, right? And the traditional brand health tracking is not really able to grasp this complexity that is intrinsic to decision making when it comes to buying. And as opposed to mental availability, which is actually addressing that issue, meaning that we're inviting consumer to think about different brands, about, well, the same set of brands, but in different buying scenarios, which means that we can really understand which brands are thought of in one scenario against the other. Of course, then the main limitation of mental availability here is that we've got less historical data, of course, because it's a newer type of approach. And also, we're still exploring the additional types and innovative types of use that we can make of the mental availability methodology. When it comes to its application and the use case, I would say that uh, 80% of the cases, mental availability is preferred to traditional brand health, just because it's way more actionable. We can really dig into the reasons why, and later we will see why I'm saying it's more actionable. So in most cases, I would go for mental availability, also because we can actually match this methodology with the traditional brand health. So just because you've got historical data with traditional brand health, it doesn't mean that you're going to lose everything by switching to mental availability. We can combine the two methods. So I would say that in 90% of the cases, I would suggest shifting to mental availability. There are some specific B2B cases where the market, the industry is very niche, where it's more difficult than to pinpoint category entry points, or perhaps when it's very specific, it has a very specific application of the products. And in that case, then also finding category buyer might be a bit more challenging. So in those cases, perhaps it's a bit trickier, and I would stick to a traditional brand health. But overall, I would always prefer mental availability to
I'm all with
traditional
you over
brand
there.
health.
I'm right there with you. But I'm guessing, I'm hoping at least that the next part we're going to see how each one of them is designed, and maybe that will help bring this idea closer to our audience here. So is that what's coming up? Are we going to see how each one is designed?
That's exactly what's going to happen
Oh,
next. We're
that's why
going
you were the perfect guest.
we're really in sync. You're reading my
Yeah.
mind. And here is the design of the traditional brand health. Again, this is a very popular approach, so I'm sure a lot of you already are familiar with this type of design. But pretty much what we're doing is asking direct questions along the lines of which of the following brands do you know? Which of the following brands have you purchased before? Which of the following brands do you consider purchasing? Or the MPS questions. And in here, we're always talking about a brand health funnel, and this is also how we're normally showcasing the results because the answer options are filtered based upon the previous answers. So imagine you say that in the first question you know brand A and brand C. In the following question, you'll always be exposed to brand A and brand C and not the rest. And this is also why we call it a brand funnel because we're going to reduce the amount of brands that you see based on the previous answer that you're given. And also, when it comes to analyzing the results, especially comparison wave on wave, what we're seeing is that we're pretty much analyzing the change. For instance, in here, we've got an example of two waves, one launched in January 2024 and one in June 2024, where if we take awareness as an example, there's a drop of 6 percentage points. So in here, we also can start seeing what is the outcome of a traditional brand health tracking. We look at the funnel with the KPIs that we've selected, and then over time, we look at the changes. And I think we can already start seeing a limitation of the method, meaning that when we look at the change, we look at this, but it's really hard for us to tell why this is happening, right? We see that all the KPIs are dropping, but why? Just looking at this data is not enough. And that's also why before I was saying that I think with mental availability, we can really then dig deeper into the reasons why, understand better the market, and really take actionable steps into growth.
So, Vale, you're a thought leader in trackings, right? You're what we would call in the community a thought leader, an expert in everything. So I want to ask you yet another question here, and specifically refers to that little red block at the bottom that says NPS. So, in your opinion, because most of the time this is used as the ultimate metric, right? We need the NPS. The NPS is the ultimate metric. As our tracking expert, what do you think about this obsession with NPS?
Right. Yeah, for sure. NPS is one of the most popular metric. I also agree a lot of clients are kind of obsessed with NPS. And I think, again, it's one of those KPIs that's been tracked for ages, right? There's a lot of historical data. There's a lot of benchmarking that we can do when we talk about NPS. And in this case, again, for those of you who are not familiar with NPS, we ask respondents to say how much they will recommend a brand on a scale from 0 to 10 to their family and friends. And based on this, we divide the respondents into three categories and then we calculate the NPS based on the difference between promoters, those who give 9 and 10 to the brand, and detractors, those who assign a score from 0 to 6. And so this NPS, again, it's very popular. A lot of people tend to well, a lot of brands tend to really base their decisions off of the NPS. However, I do not think that this single measure can be a holy grail metric that tells us what's going on with our customers. So NPS is normally a metric that is used for customer satisfaction, but on its own is not really able to tell us the full story. It can be a good high level starting point to understand how we're doing in terms of customer satisfaction and how this is moving over time. As a whole, it can be an initial good metric. But personally, if I had my own brand, I would start by, well, first of all, understanding what is driving that satisfaction for the category as a whole, but also for my brand. And then I will base my customer satisfaction KPIs uh, based on those drivers that I've already identified. So I will use the NPS as a general overview to keep everything under control, to just keep an eye on the NPS over time. But I will really deep dive then into the reasons why people are satisfied and base my KPIs on that. So again, overview, good, but it's definitely not enough to tell us the whole picture behind customer satisfaction.
I love this little TLDR. Too long, didn't read at the end. Good, but not enough. Nice.
But yeah. So moving on to the next slide.
I have a feeling I know what you're gonna talk about here.
So, in here, we can say that this can serve as a very nice way to move from what we talked up to now, meaning the traditional brand health, and moving on to the mental availability approach and especially the design. So let's say that, Hussein is spending his whole holiday season just binge watching series and movies. And, he might be thinking, oh, today I'm going to watch movies. And then he might think about a specific streaming platform. And then tomorrow he might want to binge watch series or specific rom-coms comedies. So, well, rom-coms that are typically watched during the holiday season. And so, is that how you were planning on spending your Christmas holidays, Hussein? Am I
as
correct into guessing
as
that?
I was previously exposed in the three other webinars, yes, I have confided in a person that this is how I plan to spend it, and now the whole world knows. So yes, that is very much indeed my plan.
Right. And we actually have also a question for you regarding this type of topic. So, if I tell you which is your favorite streaming platform, what are you going to say?
Oh, out of the following, okay. At the
Let's
sake of
see.
not giving free advertising as an influencer to anyone, I will not give my answers. But brand deals, let's see if we get brand deals out of this.
Good. And now
Ooh,
we look at the results. Well,
overwhelming majority, I would say.
I see.
What do
Well,
we do with
then
that information?
let's compare it against another question.
Ah,
So, yep, surprise, surprise, I have another question, which is now, which would you use for your children to watch shows? So, how would you entertain your kids? Which platforms would you go to entertain children?
I see what you did there.
Okay,
I
let's see.
ver- I see what you did. I see the path you were going on. I definitely see it. I'm a fan.
Let's see. Maybe I'm just,
Ah, exactly. Like, wow.
I'm not future teller, but I was expecting this to come. And why are we talking about this? Because again, this can really explain what we're going to see next, which is the design of mental availability, a mental availability tracking. So, again, as you remember before, we were talking about mental availability and category entry points, which really are at the base of the structure design of mental availability trackings. Why? Because what we're doing is inviting the consumers to think about different buying or consumption scenarios. In this case, for instance, imagine that you're winding down after a stressful day at work. Which platform are you thinking of? Or the example that we were giving before, imagine that you're spending your holiday vacations at home, you're feeling cozy, you just want to, spend the night in the sofa with a blanket. Which streaming platform would you go to watch some content? Or imagine you want to go on a holiday and you want to download content to watch on the plane. In this case, are you thinking about the same streaming platform or would you think about something else? So you start seeing that we're really inviting respondents to think about different scenarios because depending on these scenarios, they might think about different brands. And this is also because in this case, we're not filtering the brands based off previous answers, but we're just leaving them open so that we can really understand whether some specific brands are associated to only specific buying situations. And off of these associations, what we're doing is we're calculating for main KPIs. I forgot to mention them before, but with mental availability, we do have fairly different KPIs. They're all tracking brand health, but they're very different from the traditional ADA approach. We've got mental penetration first, which is how many category buyers associate the brand with at least one category entry point. In simple words, we want to make sure that our brand is associated with at least one of these buying occasions. And this is what mental penetration is measuring, how many people associate our brand with at least one buying scenario. Then we've got the network size, which is on average how many category entry points we are associated with the brand, meaning that we want to see out of all the scenarios that we're presenting, all the buying occasions, on average, how many are associated to my brand. And then we've got mental market share, which to me is the most important KPI because it imagines the market as a limited space that sums up to 100%. And what we're doing is really cutting this space, and we're understanding how big is the size of the brand in the market. So we can understand the percentage of the market share in the mind of the consumer. And then we've got the share of mind, which is very similar to the mental market share. And I must say that this is a KPI that is often forgotten, left aside, just because it's so similar to the mental market share. It's just built on a different base. For sakes of time, I'm not going to deep dive into this metric specifically, but it exists, it's there, and it's a especially useful metric, the share of mind, to look at over time because it really helps us understand whether we're losing or gaining relevance into the mind of people who are already thinking of us in buying situations. And why am I saying that things are more actionable? I'm saying that because of what we're going to see next. So this might be a bit scary. You see this graph, these little points, these colors, and you're like, what is this? So in mental availability, we do not stick to just looking at the KPIs as they come, but we're also trying to understand the relationship between them because this relationship is able to tell us how we can improve if we want to achieve growth. In this specific case, for instance, we've got the relationship between mental penetration and network size. I'm going to explain this graph in very simple words. So all those points that you see below the trend line, so the points that you see in the blue space are brands that have a higher mental penetration than network size. And these are brands that are only seen as fitting for a limited amount of buying occasions. Imagine, for instance, I am a brand who's only seen as a streaming platform that my kids can watch content. And that's the only associations I make in my mind. Most likely my brand will be here. So a lot of people know me. They know me, they associate me with some buying occasions, but those buying occasions are very limited. As opposed to the brands that we see in the orange area, so above the trend line, which are brands with have a higher network size and mental penetration. And in this case, this means that there's a possible problem with targeting, and we need to make sure that all the communications that we're doing as a brand are properly branded. So they need to really associate the consumption occasion, the communications that I'm doing to my brand and not to a competitor brand or to nothing. So we really need to improve with our targeting. So as you can see, this is really telling us more than just looking at the evolution of the KPIs.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it looked super interesting to be able to already have so many actionable insights, right, from running the brand tracking, which is something that maybe more traditional approaches would focus on one thing. But it's amazing to see how mental availability can give us so many different aspects by running a similar brand tracking. That's super interesting. But what about the two others? Are we going to talk about the two other KPIs that we have here and how
Uh,
they relate to each
yes.
other?
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the following slide, and this is
Mhm.
actually, I would say, the most important relationship that we can analyze when it comes to mental availability. At least in my opinion, I remember when I started working with mental availability, this was really my favorite piece of data to observe because in here we are relating the mental market share to sales volume. And why are we doing this? Because by establishing that there is a positive high relationship between the two KPIs, we can say, hey, wait a minute, if I am increasing my mental market share, I can in turn increase my sales volume. So again, more actionable because by controlling the category entry points and the association between my brand and these category entry points, I can increase the mental market share. And as a consequence, I will also increase my sales volume. So again, this is a super important piece of information. And I would say that if you were not buying into the mental availability topic up to now, this should really be opening the doors of heaven. And
I mean, we spoke about the doors of heaven, and I agree. I fully agree. We talked a lot about situations, right? We talked a lot about how when we think of situation, we did this amazing example with Netflix and Disney, which I think genius, by the way. So big fan of what you did there. But let's get. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about these situations. How do they come into play when we're talking about mental availability?
Yes, so we didn't forget about those category entry points. It's not
Mhm.
something that we're going to ignore. It's what we're going to see in the
Mm,
next slide. And we
mhm.
tend to present the associations between the category entry points and the brands in what we call the mental advantage heat map table. The scores that you can see here are actually scores. So we're just percentages that we calculate to make the whole framework more comparable and to reduce the effects of the brand size and the CP size. So if you're wondering, no, it's not the raw association between the category entry point and the brand scores that we're calculating. And we color code them so we can easily interpret the results. Overall, we say that a healthy positioning for a brand is for the score to be between 0 and 10, although ideally we would reach a score that is between 0 and 1 in all those category entry points. So we're not forgetting about this buying situation, we're looking at them in this table. And this is specifically, well, and more useful for brands to look at if they want to see how they're positioned, right? So if, imagine I am streaming platform B, I know, okay, right, so the consumer are associating me with a platform they go to watch seasonal content, to watch a blockbuster movie, or to binge watch a movie, saga, or a series. And I understand that I should probably be improving in the rest of the category entry points if I want to improve my mental market share and improve my sales as a consequence. So this is a comprehensive view that we will show, and this really helps us understand the positioning. And this is also why mental availability can also serve as a tool for campaign tracking, right? Normally, when brands are launching campaigns, they're always delivering a specific message, right? Imagine I am streaming platform B, I start a campaign because I want to be associated as a platform that really is consumed on rainy days, right? Over time, with this type of tracking, I should be seeing that the score is improving over time. And that's why we can also say that mental availability is a brand health tracking, but can also be used to measure the campaign, the effects of a campaign activity.
Nice. I mean, mental availability is always a little bit mind blowing to me because of just how many insights you can derive from it. But Vale, I guess you've seen the previous webinars that we did, and you know what I do at the end, right? You know, once we reach sort of the 11:44 mark, I always like to take my speaker and ask them, okay, our guests or our audience here is getting ready to leave. What are we leaving them with? What are maybe 3 points, or what are some points that we are going to leave them with? Why are trackings important?
Right. This is exactly the next
Of
slide.
course you have a slide. Of course you have a
I
slide.
came prepared. I did my homework. Right. So I feel like we've been outlining this from the very beginning, but without tracking, we wouldn't be able to understand what's going on in the market. And if we want to stay relevant, we need to be informed about the market dynamics and about our performance. We also use trackings because they help us track the progress and return of our strategic decisions, right? I launch a campaign, I want to learn if I'm doing things right, if this is having any return. And I think most importantly, especially when it comes to brand health, we really need to launch trackings because they really help us detect in advance potential competitive threats or changes in consumer preferences. So we really need to observe continuously the market to make sure what's going on so we can take action and make sure that we can stay relevant not only in the consumer minds but also in general in the market to make sure that there's no new entry brand that is threatening our presence. So it's truly a way for brands to stay alive, put it in simple words. It's really the one single thing that they should be doing to make sure that they're doing well, and they should be specifically doing that into Q4, entering into Q4, because this is such a sensitive period in the year where, again, not only brands are intensifying their marketing activities, but also consumers are spending more. So we really want to understand how we're doing beyond sales, right? Maybe I am doing something, my sales are not increasing, but perhaps I'm increasing in brand awareness, I'm increasing in consideration. So you always want to take a step further that goes beyond sales and you look at those brand performance KPIs. And I actually wanted to conclude this episode by saying that imagine you launch your tracking and you might be finding new insights, right? You might be finding that you have an issue with research reaching your target audience. In this case, you can go back and watch the first episode in this series, right, with Hussein and Gabriela. Or you might find out that you've got issues with pricing. In this case, we also have something for you, which is exactly the second episodes that we had with Svea. And finally, the last episodes that we had was with Julia, our beloved Dr. J, we call her, and it's about at recall. So not all PR is good PR. So truly, we're closing full circle here because with trackings, you can detect whether there are issues. And we always have a solution to then, let's say, adjust and take measurements to resolve those issues, right? So we're presenting you with the tool to figure out that there is an issue thanks to the trackings, and then also we're giving you the resources to, let's say, find the solution to these issues with our previous episodes here.
I love the plug for our previous episodes. I think this was an absolutely amazing way to end our series here and really connect it all together because it is a hero's journey coming into this madness of Q4 that we are about to witness. Vale, thank you very, very much for joining us, and everybody who joined us, thank you very much for spending your Thursday morning with us. If you want to chat any more about anything tracking, anything market research, we're all nerds here in the research team and we love to talk about it. So feel free to hit us up. Our tracking queen, Vale, you can find her on LinkedIn if you want to talk trackings. Anything market research, you can find us. Reach out and we can talk all about it. And until then, this was Get Holiday Ready with Apinio. We were so happy to have had you here in this series, and we'll see you next time. Ciao.
Bye bye.